I'd like to introduce our next speaker, and the way this is working is fascinating. Inspector Brooks has talked about the 185,000 kilometres of roadway that he looks after, and he doesn't personally look after it, but the New South Wales Police look after. And the next thing we're going to think about is what happens when the drivers come off those roads and they come onto private roads and the risk that's there. And so Lisa Foley, our next speaker, is going to speak about that. Lisa's the Director of Safe Work New South Wales Regional, where she's worked for 18 years, and she's here to discuss work health and safety as it applies to the transport industry. And following her presentation on safety around your vehicle, I'll be fortunate enough to be able to discuss some of the changes that Lisa has seen and where she thinks the focus needs to be. I'm going to encourage you, I know we were all just so shocked but looking at all those pictures and videos that Inspector Brooks brought for us, but have a think about some questions for Lisa. Add them to the stage chat. I'll be able to see them when I come back to the stage, but for now, welcome to Lisa. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for having me here today. Safe Work has been working with industry for years, but specifically with the transport sector. We engaged in consultation with the transport sector, with many transport operators who sought to work with us to identify those key priorities that we could work collaboratively together on. So what I'm going to talk through is some of those initiatives that we've got underway, but some of the focuses and where to from here for Safe Work with industry. So what I have on the screen right now are the key priorities as we see them. This was again developed in 2018 with industry, but what I'm going to focus on is a few of these. So what we basically have seen repeatedly, and this is based on incidents that have occurred, and those incidents resulting in serious injury to the truck drivers or the transport workers as a whole, because it's not necessarily always the truck driver, it could be the offsider or thereabouts, or any other person working in the depot. They occur way too frequently. These are the fatalities and the serious incidents that are notified to Safe Work. The transport sector plan is very complementary to the work of Inspector Brooks and the New South Wales Police, because we actually sought to focus on what we call the non-driving. So Inspector Brooks very much talked about those incidents that occur on New South Wales roads. I frequently talk about a truck driver who successfully navigated the highways from state to state, has successfully managed to drive from A to B and gets to the depot, and for reasons, each incident is different, is fatally injured or seriously injured. And the classic is to do with a failure to separate people, plant and product. So that is essentially the Safe Work focus. The priority areas, the at-risk workers, the working arrangements within the transport sector, those frequent musculoskeletal injuries that, again, including falls from heights, could be that sprained ankle from jumping out of the truck or jumping off the back of the prime mover after the lines have been connected. Those cumulative traumas that over time result in both physical and mental health impacts. The traffic management, the separation of people and plant, that it tends to result in more serious and fatal impacts. And the ancillary non-driving tasks is a curious one. I'm going to run through some incidents that are notified to Safe Work, where we have on our website, we have what we call incident information releases. They give a snapshot of the actual incident, of the circumstances. Many are under investigation, so I can't go into great detail, but the incidents speak for themselves. So I'm going to move off. This is some of the work that we're doing. Currently, we've launched recently what we're calling our Glovebox guide. Again, it's that safety around your vehicle with key information, and that's available on our Safe Work website. And I have some hard copies, which if any transport operator out there would like some copies for your truck drivers, happy to provide them. But again, we've provided a range of services in consultation, the Perform workshops, the mental health workshops of last year, actually the year before. We were challenged by COVID. A big shout out to 3 transport operators who I colloquially refer to them are driving around the country wearing my curtains. That's Parry Transport, Parry Logistics, Crouch Transport and Transforce. There's 3 separate trucks driving around the country with 3 separate safety messages in relation to separating people and plant, staying off your load, and again, protecting your back, minding your back because it needs to last you a lifetime. And again, the Glovebox guide of recent. We're also working, obviously, with Wholesome with this presentation today, but we're also working with several other transport operators as it relates to working with those transport operators to identify how we can work together to produce more product. Again, the Glovebox guide is one product. The presentation today is another, and we're looking for assistance from industry because Safe Work are inspectors, we're not truck drivers, so any insights that we can get from you will always be greatly appreciated. This statistic is shocking. Sorry, I'm a bit Irish, you can tell by my accent. 72% of all incidents, of all fatalities notified and recorded by Safe Work Australia are related to a vehicle. Now, we can assume that a chunk of those relate to on-road, the driving, but a percentage relate to loading and unloading, repairs and maintenance, and the 6% recorded as other is what we call those ancillary tasks. So I'm just going to pause there, and what I'm going to do, similar to Inspector Brooks, I'm going to show you a few highlights of incidents notified to Safe Work, and I'm going to run you through each of them. And you will notice a common theme. Tipper truck, rollaway fatality. The 50-year-old mechanic was working on a truck. So I mentioned it's not always truck drivers. That truck has rolled while he's working under it, and he was subsequently fatally injured. Again, truck has rolled. It's an unintended movement of that vehicle. Truck driver crushed by excavator bucket. Now, Inspector Brooks touched on shifting load in transport, acknowledging that the truck driver needed to get to the truck to unrestrain the load, but because it had shifted during transit, it rolled off the truck, and of course, he's in the strike zone and he is fatally crushed. Again, these are all last year. 2020, the loading ramp on the back of an earth mover failed its point of restraint. The motor failed and has come down and fatally impacted the truck driver. Still in 2020, again, an unintended rollaway of a truck causing fatal crush injury. Back into 2019, again, you'll notice a common theme, failure of the powered ramp on a trailer, coming down, causing fatal impact. Maintenance, location of driver, combination. This is one from 2019, and I want to pause at this one because this truck driver had successfully driven from South Australia. So how many kilometres is that? How many hours of travel is that? I'm not going to I'm not going to guess. But effectively, he's successfully travelled on South Australia, whether he went through Victoria and into New South Wales, and during the unload at actually it was a construction site, the load has shifted and he's in the strike zone. So we talk about that separation of people and product, separation of people and moving plant. Can't reiterate that strongly enough because these are what we call those non-driving fatalities. And of all those fatalities I've just referred to, they don't make the front of the Sydney Morning Herald. They don't make the newspapers, but they make it to my inbox. I know about all these fatalities. I don't know the individual drivers' names, but I know the circumstances of all these fatalities and serious injuries that are occurring in New South Wales that me and my team have a vested interest in understanding the root cause so that we can work with industry to essentially work together to prevent these fatal injuries. Again, this is one that occurred out the back of Bathurst. Truck driver working with a forklift operator, and the load has shifted. It has shifted and has fatally impacted him, not immediately, but shortly thereafter. And again, separation of people and product. Can't reiterate it strongly enough. And again, fatality here occurring where the tipper has come down because of failure to restrain. That's a snapshot. That's not an exclusive total list of all the incidents and fatals that are reported to us, but that gives you an idea. We can't stress strongly enough that separation, but we need your help because, as I pointed out, Safe Work are inspectors. Many of our inspectors come from a variety of backgrounds, including the transport sector, New South Wales Police. We are seeking to work with industry to get the message right, particularly as it relates to failure to immobilise. It defies my logic because I drive a car. I would never dream of getting out of that car and not putting the handbrake on. I think once in my life I can recall a time where I actually forgot and frightened the bejesus out of myself. So I'm only human, mistakes can be made. But how do we understand why? How can we understand what is, in that moment in time, why the truck driver got out of the vehicle whilst not restraining, while not putting the maxi brakes on? And there are circumstances where during unloading, tipping, for example, and doing the tug test on a prime mover trailer in the Connect, that you would have the handbrake off, but it's that getting out of the vehicle and then going back in again in the attempts to restrain that vehicle or bring that vehicle to a halt. So that's my plea for help. Wanting to work with you, wanting to work with industry to essentially get the messaging right. And that is essentially, and over to yourself, Ellen, where to from here?
Thank you so much for that presentation. It dovetailed perfectly with Inspector Brooks. I'll get some questions up on the slide if I can, but I mean, I've got a whole range of them. It's interesting that you talked about mental and physical health in your presentation. So the transport industry is quite male-dominated. I am understanding that the average age is around 54 years old.
Yes, 54 and male.
54 and male, okay. So I'm 53 and female.
I'm 54 and female.
Right, so I'm working pretty hard on, you know, it gets harder, right? It takes, and I don't do this kind of physical work. So what sort of programs would you like to see introduced to address the sorts of concerns about how good is the mental and physical health of my workforce, particularly a workforce that's going to spend a lot of time, as you said, you know, driving all the way from South Australia so successfully, and then you've got those issues of fatigue and so forth.
So the biggest challenge is that National Heavy Vehicle Regulation, the logbook, the requirements to drive the certain hours before a break needs to be taken. There are rules that the transport sector needs to abide by, but what you have in the middle of it is a human. You've got a human being who, in the majority, can work within those rules because truck drivers pretty much know what the obligation is on them from all the various co-regulators, whether it's National Heavy Vehicle with regards to the logbook and the logbook hours, the police with regards to controlling your speed, controlling your lane changes. So there's two different sets of rules, but there's also the work health and safety set of rules. All we can essentially do is really plead to the transport operators, the employers of the truck drivers, to talk, well, we say consult, but basically to talk, to have those conversations, because at some point a truck driver is going to need help, but do you wait until they need the help? Or do you have the conversation in advance to find out how they're faring? One of the biggest challenges, and we're currently working with Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds, it's an industry initiative. So Safe Work has several initiatives that will help you if you engage with us. We can provide you training. It's a free course for your supervisors and for your workers. But really, do you want to hear from us or do you want to hear from industry? So we're very much working and supporting the Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds initiative, which is out of a group of transport operators. New South Wales Police are collaborating, National Heavy Vehicle I think are collaborating financially. The long and the short of it is that have that conversation with the truck driver, see what you can do to help before mental health is impacted. And one of the biggest challenges for Safe Work is that in that non-driving setting, if we're working with a transport operator, we find that in the actual transport depot, the truck operator has got it sorted, or at least they should have it sorted. The challenge for the truck drivers, they're delivering, as per that photograph, the truck driver is delivering to a consignor consignee, again, that language of transport. So they're essentially going into, whether it's a manufacturer, a construction site, a farm, they're picking up, they're loading and unloading. That's the point of where they're most at risk, other than in their more controlled logistics depots. And that's where we want to find our way into those employers. But that's basically every employer in New South Wales.
Yes, yes.
There's only a few of us.
Yeah. You've got that campaign, Nobody is Built for Impact, Stay Off Your Load and Stay Safe. Why was that the focus for the campaign? And you said that all the way through the presentation. People and product, people and plant, rollaway, strike zone, stay off your load and stay safe.
So when I refer to the 3 trucks, they've each got a separate safety message. We started out with the Falls from Heights campaign, which was stay off your load, stay alive. Concurrently in the background, we've had the your back is got to last you a lifetime. Again, that musculoskeletal mental health safety message. We've run presentations concurrently. But the campaign that we had with the inspectors in the field going out to industry was the focus on falling off the load. We've shifted our focus to include the falls to now safety around your vehicle. So
it's anywhere in that strike zone that you're talking about.
Anywhere in that strike zone. And the challenge is it's just so broad, because to unload a truck, a taut liner, curtain sider, a human has to step forward and open the curtains. The same human, or different, the truck driver or the offsider or the yard worker, has to remove the gates, has to undo the strapping. So you're reliant on the load having been loaded such that it's not going to fall whilst they do that task. So the point of loading is so vital, because somebody has to step forward when you unload. And then they have to step aside while the forklift driver does the unloading. It's where the 2 of them are in close proximity, and if the load shifts and falls, dinged product is not personally going to get me excited. It might get the owner of that product excited, but personally, from a safe work perspective, it's a near miss, lesson learned. But again, separating that forklift driver from that truck driver, again, is another root cause of fatalities for us.
The other one that you were talking about a lot, we were talking about 72% of work-related deaths relate to vehicles. How much is that uncontrolled vehicles and equipment? Because, you know, again, it's extraordinary listening to this, the notion that the park brake isn't on and a driver is then leaping into the cab, Superman-like, to try and remedy the situation. And of course, you know, if that ends with a fatal injury, you could never get to the bottom of what choices were made there. So how much is it about the uncontrolled vehicles and equipment?
Well, if I just refer to that figure, 183 fatalities across Australia-wide, Safe Work Australia, the 72% of those were associated with a vehicle of some description. Could be a car, could be a truck, could be on-road, could be off-road. The exact number of those that are related to is a hard one to pick, but just to Safe Work alone, as in New South Wales gets reported to us, there's at least a dozen plus per annum of fatalities that are directly associated with whether it's falling product or rolling load. Or rolling truck.
A couple of questions I asked Inspector Brooks. You've been at this a while. Is it getting better or is it getting worse?
I'd like to think that it is getting better, but it's by no means there. There's a Towards Zero campaign of Transport for New South Wales. I would love to be brave enough to have a Towards Zero. Our transport sector plan is aiming to reduce. We're aiming to educate. I would love to get to zero. It's aspirational. I should aspire to it. It is getting better because the truck drivers are more informed. I've got to work with the rest of industry because without getting on the truck driver's soapbox for them, I think truck drivers on the road and in the depots could be treated so much better as human beings, being provided with a place to rest, being provided with an opportunity to heat up their meal, being, again, Inspector Brooks didn't show you some of the pictures I've previously seen in some of his presentations where a truck driver is given a chair in a corridor where he has to move out of the way every time the forklift travels by.
Wow. And
that was his rest break. So it's about the transport operator working with for example, a manufacturer where the truck driver is picking up a load to make sure that whilst they're at that depot or that manufacturing site, do they have access to the toilets? Do they have access to a meal room? Can they have a shower while they're there if they're going to be there for a while whilst unloading? It's that type of acceptance that a truck driver is a human being, and we really want them to be sharp on the road. We want them to be not fatigued. We want them to be well rested. And that has got to happen when the truck isn't driving, when the truck's not moving. So again, we want them to be alive and not impacted, but from a physical and mental health point of view, look after them. They're only human.
And again, I asked Inspector Brooks just because I'm curious about what drives leaders in this safety industry. You were an ICU nurse, and now you find yourself at Safe Work New South Wales. What's the connection?
Short story. I had an epiphany at the end of a bed. It was actually Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, 3 a.m. when I decided that I wanted to prevent the injury in the first place. Again, it came a few years to come to that conclusion because walking away from a career in nursing is no small feat. But my colleagues and I, we all come from different walks of life. Several are former New South Wales police. I happen to be a former nurse. Again, we all have the same aspiration, prevention. We all want to work with industry. Yes, we've got the compliance big stick, we've got the notices, we've got the fines, but that's really just as to get the point across. We want to educate, we want to work with industry because realistically that's where the biggest impact will be.
It's lovely to talk to you. Thanks so much,
bless.
Lisa. Thank you so much for coming in
today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. And again, that is our wee product that we're currently promoting. It's available both electronically and in hard copy. The idea is it will sit in the Glovebox. And you mentioned mental health. We've actually got a whole bunch of links for truck drivers. So there's, for example, we've got Ahead for Business, Beyond Blue, Black Dog, Heads Up, Healthy Head Instruction Shed, Mental Health at Work, Oz Help, Are You OK, and the Safe Work websites down the bottom. I put everybody else first because essentially if there is ever a time and the truck driver wants to reach out, pick up the phone. There's assistance available. Some simple guides and hints and tips for operators. We've got a larger guide coming for operators, but this is for the truck driver. So really proud of this, but need to promote the hell out of it.
Okay, well,
Thank
you've
you.
done that. Thanks again, Lisa. Thanks so much for your involvement today.